All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Galen Asphaug, and I'm going to be doing a presentation on why technology is easier than you think. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of an about me. So starting from way back when I was a kid. So I'm a nerd. I was... Thank you. At age 7, I was building circuit boards, like the little Velman kits. You could buy them at like the local electronics store or whatever, and I didn't really have the motor skills to solder up the kits or to put the pieces in. So what I would do is I would read the instruction manual, and then I'd have my mom put the pieces in and solder it all up. She was a big help. Thanks, Mom. And eventually my dad, he caught on to me being like a geek, that I really just loved technology. So he pulled up his computer, and I was wondering what he was doing, and he was connecting to his server at his work over SSH with the Mac command line. So he taught me a bunch of the basic Unix commands and how to kind of control a computer using the command line interface. So I didn't really do much with the command line interface until I got my first computer at age 10. But what I really wanted to do with my first computer is access the internet. You know, my parents didn't really like that. You know, good thing for me, terrible for them. But I ended up going onto this website called codeacademy.com, and I learned HTML. HTML, CSS, all the cool web development languages, and I ended up making my own web page. At age 11, 10 or 11, I made Omega Junior. It's kind of like a 8-bit retro gaming thing, but the interesting thing about it is it runs on Arduino. So for those of you that don't know what Arduino is, it's a really low-level programming languages for putting blocks of code on a microchip, and then it can output, or it can take inputs or outputs, so you can like flash an LED or read a temperature sensor or whatever you want. And you can, with this, you know, it reads the inputs of the buttons, and then it'll like, you could play a game or do whatever you want on there. I mean, I was a kid, I loved games at the time, so. At around age 11, my dad gave me a really slow laptop, a MacBook Air, and he told me to reset it. So me, I thought I knew everything about the command line interface. So I open up a terminal window and I start typing out the command rm-r/. And for those of you that don't know, wipes everything off of the drive, including the operating system. I guess it resets it, but so the screen goes black, and I try and turn it on, and it gives me a little Finder icon with a question mark on it. I'm like, oh God. So I kind of put that away. I didn't really tell him about that. But on his other computer, I asked him about his website, and he gave me the username and password to his SSH account. So I didn't do anything too bad. I just made a website, or I uploaded the website that I made earlier. This is it. I think it's still up online, ic.ucsc.edu. So it's a really simple web page, home, about, experiments, tutorials, that kind of thing. And I used it for kind of figuring out how HTML5 works, but nothing much more than that. So since I had access to the internet, I found this really interesting stock photo. For those of you who've ever taken apart a computer or anything like that, you may notice this is very wrong. So they're trying to install or remove a processor with a wrench. And that got me thinking, do people really think technology is this hard to use, or is it really that hard to build a computer? So I went ahead and answered this question by building my own. So I built this computer, and my friend, he was like, "Whoa, dude, that seems like a really big task there. You might break something, you'll waste all your money." I'm like, "Nah." So it only took me about, I don't know, 5-10 hours of work in total. But waiting for the parts was really difficult. Oh my God. So once I had this computer built, I was wondering what I would do with it. So I put some pretty nice parts in there. So I was able to do 3D rendering. Some of you may be familiar with this program. It's called Blender. It's an open source, free, love the free, open source 3D rendering program. So you can animate stuff, you can do like fluid simulations, all the cool stuff. So here's like a thing that I was working on earlier of a teacup shattering. So you do all the physics animations and stuff like that. Really fun. So it was about 2013, and at this time there was this new cool thing called the Raspberry Pi. I heard in one of the questions someone was talking about the Raspberry Pi. Anyway, it's kind of like an Arduino, but not. It's a $35 computer, and it runs on Linux. So you can upload a bunch of different operating systems on there. But I didn't know this at the time. So I thought it would be a lot like Arduino. So I bought one, and I plugged it in. And when I turned it on, I didn't get like an Arduino GUI or whatever. It gave me a login screen and then the command line interface. Very familiar. So what I did with this, instead of doing all the Arduino stuff like I was planning, is I continued to work on my website. So I bought a domain name, and I set up a static IP address, and I uploaded my website to here, waterbabushka.com. So now I had my own website, and I could experiment with a little more stuff now since I had it like right there. So I learned PHP and MySQL and a bunch of other not-so web development languages. And I continued my work with the command line interface and a bunch of other techie geek stuff. Let's see here. So I brought the Raspberry Pi to my school a couple times, or I just connected over SSH, and some people knew what I was doing, and some people had no clue. But I was bringing it in there and just kind of having fun, showing off. Tech geeks love to do that. But anyway, me and my friend, we were talking about it, and somehow we got the idea of learning Morse code. I'm not completely sure how, but anyway, my teacher, he overhears our conversation, and he tells us about ham radio. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. You can send your voice over radio thousands of miles. That's really awesome. So I started to get my license, and I got the general license, KK6 NNP, and I bought a radio, and I didn't buy a power supply. I didn't know about that yet. I thought it would be kind of like an all-in-one unit. So instead of like going out and buying a power supply, I had my old computer power supply. So I took the rails from that, and I connected the power on switch to a button, connected the 12-volt rails to these banana plugs, and I just plugged the radio in, and you could transmit from it, which I thought was pretty cool. Why not? I don't know. Kind of a waste of money just to buy another power supply. So I bought the power supply, I made the power supply, I bought the radio, and I also made a couple antennas. I made a Yagi antenna and a couple ground plane antennas. And then I also discovered digital modes. This was probably my favorite thing about ham radio, because just the idea of hooking it up to a computer, typing something out, and then sending it over to like the ISS or someone across the world is just really awesome. Like PSK31, I downloaded a program for that, and I just enjoyed like typing up stuff, hitting enter, and listening to the noises. I also experimented with SSTV, slow scan television, and I would download an app for my phone, run downstairs and then transmit the noise over my HT, and then I'd have my base station up in my room with my computer listening, and I'd just send an image to myself from downstairs. Wasn't the best way to do it. There's lots of echoing and static and whatnot. But I still thought that was really awesome. So at one of the field days, someone invited me to do to work at the digital station. So I was able to use PSK31 and RTTY, and I was talking to someone all the way from Washington. That was like one of the best days of my life. It was really cool. So you may be wondering why I told you all this. You don't need to be a genius to operate a radio or to build a computer or to use a good percentage of all the technology around. A 15-year-old can do it. And also, I just wanted to point out some of the really false assumptions about technology. Just please don't use a wrench to install a processor. So my future projects, I want to have a Raspberry Pi operated repeater or a transceiver. I was thinking I could use a piece of software called Open Repeater, so I could put that on there and then use the GPIO pins that it has to send signals to the radio. And also fix that old laptop and restore OS X, give it back to my dad. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask.
So, what would you like to do when you get old like me and Stan here on the way to that trip to retirement, if that exists?
Well, when I was a kid, we're going back. No, more like, I don't know, 6 or 7. First grade, I got the same question from one of my teachers. It was on a worksheet. And I just drew a picture of an old computer, one of the Mac G3s, and a picture of me taking apart a Mac. And I just said, I want to be a computer fixer. So, I don't know, it hasn't changed much. I'd be happy doing anything technology related.
How annoyed were your parents when you were doing the PSK over speakers? Because my dad was pretty annoyed when I started doing that.
Oh, yeah. Terrible, yeah. Mostly my brother. He actually, I guess my stepbrother, he's right next to me, and he just hear these annoying screeching noises. And when I tried to unpack it, he was just like, oh, God. You know? Oh, yeah.
It seems like you've made the transition between the digital world and the RF world pretty seamlessly. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have to the digital techies your age that they can make the transition like you did, or because that's not the trend. The trend is to stay digital now,
right.
And RF is actually losing ground in the world.
Mm. Well, how should I answer that? What I did, I guess it's kind of similar to picking up any new technology or any kind of technology. So with the command line interface, I just didn't know anything about it. I didn't know that it was like, it could be scary. People thought it was scary. So I just like walked up to it with open arms. I suggest doing the same thing, but I'm not completely sure.
You mentioned that you started learning to code using Code Academy.
Oh, yeah.
My daughter uses Code Academy.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. It's a great website.
One thing that I've noticed, however, as a professional programmer, is that kids who start out using coding in an environment such as Code Academy seem to have difficulty transitioning into, let's say, a more adult programming environment.
Right.
Can you give us any tips about how you made that transition yourself?
Well, on Code Academy, you know, I just learned the basics of HTML. So once I learned something new, I just made a text file and started typing up some HTML, and then I opened it with Chrome. So I think I just got the idea that, you know, not all the code is in Code Academy. You got to take it out of there and open it in some other program. But other than that, yeah, that's about it. You just got to, it's not all in Code Academy. You got to take it out of there, do something with it.
Congratulations for taking that initiative.
Yeah, thank you.
First of all, I'd like to say that the fact that you say you're not a genius may not apply to those of us listening to you. So I think you probably underrate your ability, and that's nice that you do that. Secondly, how would you, or what would you recommend those of us that are older, not as old as, for instance, Carol in his, you know, long past sexagenarian, but how would you recommend we entice younger people to become more involved in technology without overwhelming them with technology? Beyond games.
I don't know. I think it's back to all the false assumptions. I don't know. I used to be kind of scared of it. And like my friend, when I was building the computer, he said, like, oh, you'll waste a bunch of money, you'll break your parts or whatever. So I think it's just that people might be kind of scared of it. So you'd need to tell them it's like, it's easy. It's not difficult. You're not going to break anything as long as you read the manual.
So kudos on everything that you've done. It's been said, I think, inaccurately, that younger people don't have interest in technology. But then you go to the Maker Faire, and there's 130,000 people there for a 3-day event, and many of them are young. Yet amateur radio is not necessarily part of that. You know, it's unlicensed operation. As a younger person who's made the transition from technology into amateur radio, and feel free to be honest, what holds your peers back from getting into amateur radio? What, if you could change things about the hobby to make it more attractive to younger people, what would it be?
Well, I think a big reason is just they think it's not very useful, which is a lie. I mean, you could definitely use it. I mean, I was reading all about the emergency situations and stuff like that. But for reasons that they would want to use it. What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
So I think the emergency operation is interesting, but not everybody has a passion for that.
Right.
You know, in other words, I simplify the question. How could we make amateur radio more fun to attract your peers into the hobby? And your perspective on this as a younger person. You've said that it's a lie, that it's not interesting, but clearly there's a barrier there. Somewhere along the line, younger people look at this and think, well, maybe I don't want to make that transition. What is that? What are those barriers?
Well, so they don't think it would be very useful, but I think a good way to get them to start using ham radio would to kind of integrate it with the stuff that they're doing, like digital modes. So if they're already doing a bunch of digital technology, programming, stuff like that, you could talk to them about digital modes, tell them how you can integrate radio with a computer, and tell them about SSTV, which was a big wow to all my friends.
Well, representing Icom, I want to thank you for what you're doing in getting into the digital world, and I'm going to offer you some Icom toys to help you grow.
Are you serious? Thank you. Thank you.
Can you describe a little just what your school environment is? From a school learning technology environment. I mean, I think I'm the only kid now, not only in Canada but in North American high school, that was exempt from phys ed because I couldn't dribble a basketball or kick a soccer ball. So they gave me the keys to the AV room when I was, in grade 7. And I was exempt, and they gave me 68%, which was my lowest grade in school. But I laughed when it was minus 30 degrees Celsius outside in Montreal in the snow when kids were in shorts playing soccer, and I had an office called the AV room with all the equipment and a coffee maker. So can you describe a bit for us that work with youth and a perspective of what you have as technical resources or educational resources in your school? And by the way, what grade?
I'm a sophomore.
Okay.
Yeah. So my teacher, he's right behind you, Brian. So I go to a school in Scotts Valley. It's called Wilderness Skills Institute, and they're really focused on learning what you want to learn.
What is your school environment, please?
We go to Fall Creek, which is the Redwood Forest. 5 days a week, we hike in there, go down to the creek, and I don't know, we bring in whatever we want to learn about. Some people bring textbooks. I'll bring a computer or a Raspberry Pi, or a radio.
He's in the forest 170 days a year, 6 hours a day in the forest that he has to hike into.
Yet, I'm a technology nerd.
How much homework do you have each night?
However much I want to, whatever I want to work on.
Would you be able to do what you were doing if you had been going to a typical school where you had to do the amount of homework that you were used to before you came to our school?
Definitely not. I used to go to a highly academic school back in Santa Cruz, and there would be like 2-3 hours of homework each night. No time for hobbies, just all work. All right. I think that's about it. Any more questions?
How's your soldering skills coming along?
I was thinking of putting a picture of the backside of the Meggy Jr. They're okay. I mean, it works. When I built it, yeah, that was a while ago. I think I said I was 10 or 11. They're better. They've improved. But, there are still a couple. Yeah, I think they're okay. They work. Yeah, when I first built it, there was like a line on the display that was constantly lit, so I kind of had to go back and fix that. But other than that, everything worked. So, I mean, it works, so. All right. Any more questions? Thank you.